Hey, what's up, y'all? This your boy Andre, one half of the dynamic duo. Where there's a Will, there's a Dre. Will is not here with me today. We're both kind of under the weather, so I'm going to fly solo on this one. But hopefully he'll be back soon, and we'll be back to discussing all things sports and otherwise. But as we approach the All-Star weekend coming up, this video will be focused on the ongoing beef between two of the greatest All-Stars in NBA history, Michael Jordan and Isiah Thomas. Now, before I start, please be sure to like and subscribe, click that notification button, so each time Will and I post a new video, you'll be the first one to get dibs on it. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so Isiah Thomas and Michael Jordan hate each other. Goes without saying, right? And this beef goes back over 25 years. And I'll kind of get into some of the history behind it. But first off, before I start, there were some segments that were famously making their rounds that went viral during some of those NBA TV player-only interviews. The first one was with with Magic Johnson and Isiah Thomas, as they famously reconciled all their differences. They had that moment where, they discussed their history and how they got to that bad place, and then ultimately how they reconciled. The same thing happened with Shaq and Kobe a few years later. These very famous beefs that were resolved in person for the whole world to see. And if you go to the comment section of any one of those videos, you'll see, a whole bunch of rap artists that people are hoping to reconcile and stuff like that. And other sort of famous beefs, but you'll see people always asking for an Isiah and Michael Jordan reconciliation. Now, this video will show why that will never happen in this world. So let's get into it. So let's first look at some of the history. So Isiah Thomas came from Chicago, right? I think the south side of Chicago, like one of the rough parts of the city. And for a long time, Isiah was Chicago's darling child. He wound up going to Indiana and got drafted by the Pistons, obviously. But for a long time, he was Chicago's bright star. And then Michael Jordan came around. Michael Jordan wound up getting drafted by the Bulls, and pretty much overnight, stole his city from him. Like, we were getting to the point where when the Pistons came to town, people were booing Isiah in his own town and celebrating and exalting Michael Jordan. I think that's where it all kind of started. Athletes are very egocentric and competitive. And, when somebody steals your city, then that's going to start the whole sort of thing. So it started very early in their careers. But then it sort of went in a different direction. And I think the beef really started with that infamous All-Star game freeze. Now, Michael Jordan, in his own deluded mind, which I'll talk about in a minute, convinced himself that, people like Isiah Thomas, Magic Johnson, George Gervin, all sort of froze him out during his rookie year. The idea or the accusation was that people were jealous of him. He came rocking his Nike gear. He was kind of doing things unconventionally, and he was kind of brash and cocky for a rookie, and they wanted to put him in his place. So in his mind, he got locked out of that game. That some stars colluded to keep him, to ground him and elevate. To ground him and to take away his sort of posture or whatever. And that was in his mind. Now, and in fact, I would argue that infamous game never existed. Now, there's a video out here, and I'm going to link that video in the description, showing some user went through painstaking detail to find all the times that Isiah Thomas dished the rock to MJ during that game, to prove that there was no lockout there. And on top of that, some of the other actors who were allegedly involved were not even on the same team. I mean, he was saying that Magic Johnson was involved. He played for the West. And George Gervin, he was on the West squad. So we already have this narrative created that Michael Jordan is the victim, and it sort of fuels how he became the competitor that he is today. But it's all delusion. Hold that thought. But then later on, there was a a documented dominance of the Pistons against the Bulls over an extended period of time. Like for several years deep into the playoffs, the Pistons would always seem to have the advantage over the Bulls. And Michael Jordan is not trained to magnanimously accept defeat from his opponents. That's not a part of his competitive drive. Now, you can make the argument that he did at least show some grace in defeat, shaking hands and acknowledging the winners and stuff like that. But for a long time, the Pistons had a dominance over Michael Jordan, which for a competitor like him is just hard to swallow. Now, take that all the way up until 1991. Okay. This is when the Bulls were a lot more mature. They had kind of gotten over the Pistons. They learned the Pistons. They were mentally and physically stronger, and they just straight gave them the business. A complete sweep. Now, some of those games were somewhat close, 8-point wins here, 6-point wins here, whatever. But by and large, that game was nowhere near competitive. The Bulls had finally gotten over that hump. They were ready to advance to the next level. And during game 4 of that series, when the Pistons were on the verge of getting swept, the team famously walked off the court without acknowledging the Bulls. Now, the Pistons bad boys had already developed a reputation of being, thugs and dirty players, etc. And for everybody who hated the Pistons, that pretty much solidified it. The walk-off pretty much validated everything people said about them. Look at these graceless people who can't accept defeat, bullies who got bullied themselves, and now they're walking away. All these narratives that were created. But now there's some context behind that people often fail to recognize, which is why I think Isiah kind of has some beef and some pretty fair and legitimate beef. Okay, so first off, prior to game 4, Michael Jordan went into the media and completely trashed the Pistons, saying how they were bad for basketball, they were undeserving champs, everybody would be happy when they're gone, all this stuff. And first off, the media is going to accept it like it's gold, because at that time, Michael Jordan is, and to an extent continues to be, the poster child in the media. There is this sort of blitz to make Michael Jordan the face of the league. And of course, anything he says will be taken with a grain of salt. So, so when he got into the media and started trashing these guys, they had a sense of righteous indignation. And, Isiah said it himself, and I'm going to also link the clip that shows the interview that he had, where he pretty much validated their existence. And he was like, we have gone through the ringer ourselves. We've gone through so much to get to this point. And for you to trash us like that, that's a diss. And that's a stab in the heart. No way in the world are we going to acknowledge you after doing that. And now keep in mind that the Pistons did go through all kinds of growing pains to get where they were. They had to go through, and Isiah in particular, he had to go through, losing to the Knicks, despite having that 16-point and 90-second explosion. He still lost that game. And it was a game 5 at the time, which was an elimination game. And then he had to go through the bad pass with the Celtics that cost him that game and ultimately that series in 87, I think. And then in 88, he had to go through, the 42-point on a bad ankle game where the Pistons were hosed at the end with a phantom foul. So he had to go through all these different types of, pains and adversities to get to the mountaintop. And just because the Pistons got there in a way that the Bulls didn't like, and in particular that Michael Jordan didn't like, which focused on the Jordan rules, which focused on physical play, he trashed them in the media and people just kind of went along with it. And so when it got to the point where Isiah had a real, true, and authentic chance to pass the torch to Michael after they had completely swept them and just blew them out of the water, Michael Jordan did all that mess. And so, they're going to walk off in righteous indignation. So that was, I think there's some important context there that people just don't want to talk about. What's next? Oh, and then after that, There was also the infamous Dream Team snub. Now, you can make an argument. And actually, before I get into that, for context, in '92, as a part of the league's attempt to really start to internationalize the sport, the Dream Team, the U.S. men's basketball team, started focusing on having pros on their squad, and they assembled the Dream Team, which we all know was the greatest basketball team ever assembled. And Isiah was famously snubbed from that team. Now, when you hear records and hear history, it's because everybody wanted him gone. Nobody wanted him on the team. And, he would jeopardize team chemistry, and not even his own coach advocated for him. You hear all these different sort of excuses to justify why Isiah was not on the team. Now, you can make an argument, and a very fair one, that Isiah did not do a good job of making friends. Like with Larry Bird, for instance, if we go back to, I believe it was the 1987 conference finals, when Dennis Rodman famously said that, Larry Bird was just another good player, and he's getting all this love because he's a great white hype. You remember that? And Isiah had a chance to clean that up, and he didn't. And he doubled down on it, and he tried to cover it up by saying he was sarcastic and joking around and stuff like that. But he never really addressed that elephant in the room. He missed an opportunity, and an opportunity that he will admit to himself to this day that he did mess up. There was an interview that he had with Larry Bird where he acknowledged the fact that Bird saved his career by not driving that point home. But it was still out there. And there's still this impression that, maybe Isiah is not the sort of babyface gamesman and statesman that people were making him out to be. And then the Magic Johnson thing, too. There were rumors swirling around about Magic Johnson's HIV diagnosis and that Isiah was the culprit. And they since patched that up. And Isiah had denied vehemently that he was not the one spreading those rumors, and that but that unfortunately still cost him. But the ultimate culprit, the main culprit here, was Michael Jordan. Why? Because, again, Michael Jordan was the face of the league at the time. He's the face that you're trying to put on a league that you're trying to make go global. So, yeah, you're going to listen to what he says. When the face of the league says, I don't want this dude on the team, you are going to concede. This is the Michael Jordan who was selling sneakers all over the place, who Gatorade told us we want to be like, who was in Space Jam, and who was just the the person that you want to build your new rebranding around. So if this dude says he doesn't want you on the team, guess what? You are not going to be on that team. And even though Isiah Thomas had a very formidable body of work up to that point, it wasn't enough. So that was it. And so Jordan famously had involvement in that whole thing. And that also created an additional ripple in their sort of ongoing beef. And then The Last Dance happened. You fast forward to, whatever year it came out. But The Last Dance was a documentary chronicling the Bulls' ascension into the NBA, their multiple three-peat championships, and talking about all the obstacles and hurdles that they had to go through. But really, if we're being honest, The Last Dance was nothing but a Michael Jordan grievance. Had a chance to, air every single petty disgruntlement, if that's a word, that he had with everybody in the league, including Isiah Thomas. And he famously called him an asshole. The Last Dance also did something else that maybe Jordan did not intend. It validated the fact that MJ is a jerk. And MJ is a jerk. He's petty, and he was covered so long by the NBA because of the need to promote this brand and to protect the image of that brand, that they casually overlooked a lot of the stuff that made him a jerk. And a lot of that stuff came out during the documentary, whether it was intentional or not. And let me give you an example. Okay, so Michael Jordan was not a compulsive gambling addict. Oh, no. He was competitive. He wasn't a bully teammate who, flexed his power and flexed his authority to people who just wanted to keep jobs. Oh, no. He was a leader. That kind of whitewashing was something that the league was notorious for. And Isiah Thomas just refused to kiss the ring and bow down to Michael Jordan, and he paid the price for it. And if you even look at Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech, instead of just thanking people, instead of being humble at that moment, thanking his fans and his supporters and his teammates, his coaches, he spent the entire Hall of Fame speech airing grievances and being petty. He even brought, this dude even brought his high school teammate who got the spot over him as a guest. Like, that's the kind of pettiness and the kind of vindictiveness that has defined Michael Jordan for years, but nobody wanted to talk about it. The minute that Isiah even dares bring it up or refuses to kiss the ring and bow down, he's considered the bad guy. Now, you can make an argument that the Pistons bad boys team, that whole era, they played dirty. Okay, fine. Now we can turn that into a game of semantics, because I'll say that it was a physical game. And the 80s and 90s were physical at that time. And the Pistons just happened to do it better. Now, if you don't believe that it wasn't physical then, outside of the Pistons ecosystem, go look up people like Maurice Lucas. Go find Charles Oakley. Go look at Charles Barkley. I mean, there were enforcers in the league. And so much so that David Stern decided to sort of refocus and recalibrate the league to focus more on artistry and pageantry as opposed to blue collar, physical playing. So this idea that, the Pistons were out there with sledgehammers trying to take everybody out and hurt and injure and end careers is just nonsense. It was a byproduct of how the game was at that time. And the Pistons just happened to do it better. But again, when you have this situation where you have to sort of overlook for a moment the accomplishments of Michael Jordan and the Bulls in favor of, looking at the impressive streak that the Pistons had, then they don't want to do it. And, of course, Isiah has a natural sort of inclination to be upset about that. And think about this. The 80s were really all about promoting the Celtics and the Lakers, that dynasty and those rivalries all throughout the 80s. The 90s were about the ascension of Michael Jordan. But for that brief moment, for those 2 years, it was all about the Pistons and their style of play and how they broke up those parties. And they just don't get the proper recognition in history that they deserve. And I think that will also be something that Isiah carries home with him. So, and because Michael Jordan is extremely petty and extremely vindictive, and that's a part of his personality, and that's a part of, what makes him the greatest of all time, he will never acknowledge what he did or how he did it. And Isiah Thomas won't back down either. So I'm sorry, y'all, but if you were expecting to see that reunion, that reconciliation, sorry to say, y'all, ain't gonna never happen. So you probably have a better chance of winning the Powerball. So that's why I don't think they'll ever reconcile. They will always hate each other, and it'll also add to the allure of what the NBA is. All right, so that'll do it for today. Let me know what you think. Drop some comments. Am I right? Am I wrong? Should Isiah be the bigger man and apologize? Do you think Michael Jordan will ever apologize? Do you think that their ongoing beef is what makes the NBA great? I'm kind of curious to know what you think. So go ahead and drop those comments, and let's keep it going. So until next time, this is Andre from Where There's a Will, There's a Dre, and we'll see y'all on the next video. Peace.